Hello and welcome to Super Respectable. My name is David Lewis and my wonderful co-host Tosh Rahman. How are you?
I am good, Dave. How are you?
I'm good. Trying to stay afloat. As I was saying to you before recording, new job, new MBA term. It's pretty hectic times, but it's good to be busy, is what people tell me. So here we are.
There you go. Very, very good. And the
I'm not
motivate.
on the beach. I'm actually working. This is just again imagined
Oh, so no need
situations.
for the actual hat, right? Indoors, it's just for aesthetic purposes.
It's aesthetic.
That's good. And how is life in the Netherlands? Like, how is your country doing as we enter the fall season?
Well, they put up the Christmas lights on the street, which is crazy, and it's dark already. So it's getting around to be the wonderful time of the year and depressing time of the year where they're getting dark so soon. So it's fine, no complaints. It's all good. COVID starting to take off a little bit here, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. And is Christmas a big deal? Like the holidays in the Netherlands, they really like amp it up. They like it.
Yeah, well, around December, early December, they have Sinterklaas who comes, and that's always a slightly controversial thing,
Yeah.
because there used to be the slaves that would hang out next to Santa,
I think we had this
and
discussion on a previous
yeah,
one.
yeah. So when I first moved here into this particular apartment, there were some blackface situations that I couldn't believe, but it's quite common here.
Yeah, we don't have. I mean, I was gonna say we don't have that here, but I mean, our prime minister.
Just the prime minister.
But yeah, I think in Europe, for example, the holidays are a really big deal, right? Like things start really early, and they really kind of get into it. I don't know. In Ottawa, I kind of found that it was kind of here in Vancouver. It's really not like as visible, but maybe that's because there's no snow here. Maybe it's like that aesthetic of winter doesn't really exist here. But yeah, like in the Europe, I think it's like you've lived in three European places, cities. Holidays are pretty evident, right? Like pretty visible, lights, Christmas trees. It's
Yeah, I mean, what's cool in like Central Europe and the Germanic countries is they're pretty good at their Christmas markets. So that's a nice thing to do, I guess. It helps with the Christmas feeling. And here in the Netherlands, yeah, like I said, the early parts of December is when like the real Christmas celebrations happen.
right.
But yeah, it's mid-October, so I don't want to talk about Christmas too much.
Yeah.
That's
And
crazy talk.
before we started, we were talking about how it was Canadian Thanksgiving just a couple days ago here.
Yes, the original and best.
Original Invest. If people don't know, American Thanksgiving is sucks and it sucks. No, it's weird that theirs is in November, ours is in October. I've always found that strange, but whatever. I guess it's a national thing. But does it exist in the Netherlands in any form?
Zero form.
Zero.
Maybe the expats from the United States and Canada try to make it a thing, or they're homesick and they do it. But
Yeah.
I don't fall for that crap.
Yeah.
So don't do it.
Don't do it.
But it's crazy. Like people, like last year, I was very kind. I was invited to a friend's place for Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And
In
they went
the
all out.
Netherlands?
They got a
Oh.
they got a turkey and everything. Because the animal, the turkey, they're not like roaming around the Netherlands and Belgium. So that's quite a thing to get flown in.
Yeah, I got it. And we also talked about how we both dislike turkey. I think, and wait, I can't be 100% horrible with it. There's some parts of the turkey that are like okay, but most of the time I find it really dry and chewy. Like that's my taste. But we used to whenever we did turkey, we'd always have so many leftovers. We'd eat it for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner the next couple of days.
Yeah.
Sometimes reheated turkey is okay. It's not bad, but I'd rather go for chicken than turkey any day.
Yeah, it's a strange one where it's like you have to have turkey for Christmas or Thanksgiving, otherwise it's ruined
It's
in some
style.
people's minds.
And now,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Well, this poor animal, like it just gets killed on an industrial scale for two events per year, and that's it. No one really thinks about it any other time, which goes to show it's like people don't crave turkey or they don't go out of their way for turkey.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe once in a while, but like you, I kind of get sick of it after having turkey soup, turkey this, turkey that for the eighth and ninth meal afterwards.
Yeah, that's true. And now with like, I think more people are trying to go meat free, right? So like, there's like
Mm,
meat alternatives. But I always like the fixins, the things on the side. Like I always like the
that's
cranberry
nice.
sauce and the potatoes and everything else. So yeah, so it's good. I mean, I hope you're able to celebrate whatever it is that you need to celebrate wherever you
Thank you very much.
are. Um, I think it's your week, and this is episode 51. We have one more, and then we hit a year mark, which is very exciting. Uh, uh,
It is quite exciting.
um,
So I
you,
was thinking this episode, do some kind of meta episode
okay.
where I podcast about podcasting.
Oh, well, let's see. Okay.
So hopefully our listeners don't fall asleep with this riveting subject matter, but I think it's kind of interesting to talk about uh, how far we've come, the Super Respectable podcast. So
Okay.
let's start off with a few stats
Oh,
on.
is that why this morning when I logged into Super Respectable, all those reports were downloaded?
Yeah, I downloaded some Excel sheets and things. So get ready, listeners. It's going to get pretty exciting here.
Okay, cool. Let's do it.
So yeah, just as you noticed, I downloaded some data on our listeners, and don't worry, it's not like in Europe there's GDPR violations. There's nothing on individual listeners. It's all at a aggregated level, so don't worry, we're not tracking at that kind of granularity, but we can get country data, time of day, episode popularity, that sort of thing. I think that could be kind of cool to talk about. So our most popular country, I think we all know, it's our dedicated following in India. We have 81% of our listeners coming from India. So thank you very much to our Indian listeners.
Thank you. Why do you think that is, Dick? What's your theory behind this?
Well, my theory would be the ads that we send into India on a weekly basis would probably be doing that. We've done a few thematic episodes on India, and we try and talk about India in a general way. So hopefully our listeners there find that interesting. But I think possibly our attempt to market our podcast to India was the main factor there. Number two, do you have a guess for number two popular location?
I remember last time I took a look at the analytics. America?
America is responsible for 5%. So there's quite a drop off once you leave India. But we've got a grand total of Canada's number 3, by the way. So we have been listened to in a grand total of 64 countries. I think that's pretty impressive.
That's really cool. Wow, I didn't know that. That's almost
64 countries.
Third of the world.
To be fair, Puerto Rico is listed as the 64th country, and it's not technically
whatever. It is in my book.
It is in our for our listeners. So hopefully our Puerto Rican listeners will grant you statehood. Yeah. So we've had listeners from the Republic of Suriname, Mauritius, Afghanistan, Malawi, you name it. I mean, Nepal has clocked in for a few. It's just I get really excited when I log in and check where someone's listened to our episodes from, because I'm wondering like how they found us, what episode they listened to. It's just very exciting to produce some content and maybe someone accidentally clicked on us and listened to our episode and quickly logged off. But either way, we've had someone around the world listen to our voices, which is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, that is kind of weird to think that like you could be in a cafe and like wherever and they'd be like, I know that voice. That's
distinctive
very cool.
voices.
Wow, I'm gonna think about that number. That's very, very cool. Okay, keep going. Sorry, I will save my questions until the
end. So that's it for countries. I'll go to episode popularity. So we have one episode which is just gone viral. It's just blown every other episode out of the water, and it was one that you had the story for. So round of applause to Tosh for that one.
Thanks, man.
I'm sure you know which one it is.
Yeah, it was the Shah Rukh Khan one, right?
Who is Shah Rukh Khan? So
I,
that one really captured the imagination and the attention of, I assume, our Indian listeners.
yeah,
Um,
I love him.
they were just entertained by the fact that we had to ask the question, "Who is Shah Rukh Khan?"
Who is Shah Rukh Khan?
It's like having an episode, "Who is Tom Cruise?" and then advertising that in the U.S.
I think,
Um,
I mean, based on my preliminary research and like personal knowledge, that I knew he was like the world's biggest star in terms of like acting and film. So I just figured that perhaps that might be of interest because in India, like these people are like very well known and like people really follow their personal lives as well as their professional lives. And statistically, like India's got over 1 billion people. So like, you know what I mean? Like, I just thought that people would enjoy that topic, but I'm glad it's still going strong. I mean, we can do other.
4,000 downloads,
Oh,
4,400 downloads. So that accounts for um, half of our overall downloads. That's really well done, Tosh. So please try and produce more of those blockbusters for.
sure. Do you think Shah
uh,
Rukh Khan listened to his own episode? Do
I
you think?
think eventually someone might let him know that these two morons made an episode about him. And,
You know what's
I
crazy?
don't know.
Do you remember when we had your friend on, Sid from India,
Yeah,
and like so like in our minds 4,000 is a lot, but like 4,000 out of like over 1 billion people doesn't even break like a percent of a percent of a percent. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
it's not that that was our intention or our goal, but I'm just thinking like it's so weird to think that depending on your perspective, it's like either really big number or a really small number. You know?
I
So
think
like
you have to look at it in perspective. I wouldn't compare that number to the population of India, but in terms of our overall impact on the audience, it's half of our
yeah,
audience has
yeah,
listened to that episode.
totally, very cool.
So that's very impressive.
Thank you.
Number two is our first ever episode. So another Tosh powerhouse show,
And I
the
gotta
Island of the Dolls.
And I gotta be like 100% honest. I think one of the reasons I did this podcast was because I talk about this weird stuff and look into it. So I just needed an outlet to get it out. so, and then that island was always something that I was like, that's super cool. And so like I knew that was like a good topic for me. But people like that one, huh? I guess they like weird, freaky, ghost and ghouly things. So yeah,
Yeah.
it still
So
it still gives me
what's that?
jitters to think about that island. You know what I mean? Like it's still creepy.
That island is extremely disturbing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not nice. And then number three is the great episode of India where we
Deal.
interviewed. That was me. That
That's
was
it.
actually Sid. So Siddharth Singh, a very good job. That's our top three right there.
So we have
And
two
yeah,
Indias, yeah. But I do have to say, like, maybe you'll get to this later, but like, not only a big thanks to Sid, but all our friends who've come on.
all
Like,
our friends.
all, I mean, people gave their time and their energies, and like, they don't like us anyways, but they still did it, and so.
And we offer nothing. There's
Oh, for nothing.
no
But
compensation whatsoever.
I did
Um,
like that Sid episode a lot because I learned a lot about like India from within rather than from like what I knew. So that was a really cool little perspective.
Yeah, and Sid is super knowledgeable on many things, so it's great to get his perspective on a variety of topics relating to India.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and what's interesting, one last little super respectable factoid I'll throw out to our dear listeners is listening methods. I find this one kind of peculiar because I've never heard of the number one way that people have listened to Super Respectable, and that's through an application called Geo7.
Yeah.
Never heard of it,
So I'll
but
give you a little.
43% of our downloads come from that.
Yeah. So when I was setting up, so the way it works is that Dave is like Dave funds everything and I do all the work. So, so I took care of the tech, right? And then Dave takes care of marketing. So when I was setting up our podcasts and stuff, we do it through a site called Simplecast, and they're amazing if they want to sponsor us. And so they have a really good system where you can just like choose all the different podcast platforms around the world to be on. So I just chose everything. And so Geo7, I remember Googling it, and it's pretty much just like particularly for India. Like it's an Indian based podcast platform. So I'm sure some of those like 4,000 downloads, the majority of which probably came from that site.
That
So like, so yeah, so I think it's
was a very savvy move. Very
yeah.
good, Tosh. And because number three is Ghana Music, Gaana. So I
Oh,
assume that's a similar type of application.
sure.
Never heard of it.
I remember,
So good
yeah,
move.
I mean, good. As anyone knows, a good, you go to where your customers, or your clients, or your clientele are, and if our listeners are at this platform, we'll go there. But I remember when we first got onto iTunes, I was so excited. I like took a screenshot and sent it to like my, and like I was like, look at that iTunes, and then. But it is really cool, the world of podcasting, and especially how accessible it is. Now you can pretty much go from one site to like all your different platforms within seconds.
And one thing that's pretty cool, I don't know if it's just because it's me Googling it, but if you Google super respectable, now it's us. We dominate the search results. So
I
we're
I
having some sort of impact on the world. I don't know
Yeah.
whether it's good or bad. It's
Uh,
neutral.
at the beginning, I used to Google ourselves a lot and be like, "Does it come up? And does it come up?" And then I have a Google filter. What do you call it? The Google keywords. You know, if anything comes up. And so unfortunately, I don't get any emails with Google or Super Respectable. I always get like, something that is not related, where the word Super Respectable were somehow put together. But that is cool. We're like on the top of the search engines. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I think that's fantastic. And now I think I'll just broaden this out to take a step back and look at podcasting as a whole.
Sure.
So
Can I
um,
can I say just
yeah,
one thing before we move out there? Just as another
yeah.
thank you, is that, do you remember what the name of our podcast was going to be at the beginning? Like it was it was NARF,
Yeah, it was slightly juvenile, Narf pod.
but then, which is stupid. But then our friend Marcus, along on episode 3 or whenever we talked about COVID, said what you guys are doing is is super respectful. We're like, hey, that should be the name. So thank you to Marcus for putting us in our place and setting us a track.
And speaking of yeah, track, we have to also thank Kentaro Ide. He
Oh, and
came up with the
cool.
intro outro music, which is fantastic. He's quite a maestro on the keyboard.
It's and he's such a nice guy, and we have it in our beginning and our end, and so we always try to promote him on our pages as well. Check him out. But thank you, Kanatra. That was really cool of you as well.
Kentaro, and not Kentaro, but yes.
Uh,
There we go.
and my name's Japanese too, so how horrible is that, right?
Yeah, terrible.
Okay, so let's talk about podcasting generally, because this is something we're in. We should know our field.
So yeah, I was going to go a bit general, and then maybe we can talk about like some of our do's and don'ts and tips and tricks and lessons learned.
Cool.
This is not like a concluding episode by any stretch. I just thought it'd be a cool time to talk about like where we're at and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So first of all, podcasting. What a funny word, right?
Yep.
Where does the word come from? Any idea?
No, I don't know.
No. It's basically ripping off of Apple, as a lot of people like to do. So it's a combination of iPod and broadcast. So podcast.
Yeah, obviously.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was apparently invented in 2004 by a Guardian journalist. They came up with the name for the concept of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like obviously coalesced around a whole bunch of factors, largely technological, right? Faster internet, the ability to record on the computer and then push that out there to loads of people requires high speed internet, which didn't really come online until early 2000s. People having it on their phones really helps things, having it mobile rather than like desktop. So if you're on your commute, you can listen to it, or walking around the house, you can listen to your podcast. So that's great. There was a guy named Adam Curry who is known as the podfather of podcasting. I hadn't heard of him until I just Googled it, but he had this show called The Pod Show in 2004. So really early on.
Yeah.
And it was basically what I'm doing now, is a show about like very meta podcasting about podcasting.
Okay.
And I think he was just talking about like how the concept works. He had come up with some developers in the Netherlands, I think, with this add-on to try and like an initial app for podcasting. because the early iPod iTunes store didn't have a possibility of listening to podcasts. So there were all these kind of developers who were creating like applications for you to be able to listen to people like us talk.
Cool.
And so he had this thing with the Pod Show, which he had out there. But then Apple kind of got wind of this concept, and then they released a new version of iTunes, which supported podcasts, and that really helped people get out there once Apple got involved. And so today there's now more than 115,000 English language podcasts that are available.
That's insane.
It's actually kind of hard to find good data on podcasts, but because I think it's just so dispersed. It's like, there's so many different mediums, as we talked about, that people can put it out there.
Yeah.
And some of them are like exclusively on Spotify. Some of them are on Apple exclusively. So it's hard. I tried to find like aggregated, like what's the top podcast or like a chart. And there actually isn't really a good list as far as I found. Maybe you found something better.
I mean, I think it based on when we first started, I did a little bit of research and I found that the lists were always changing depending on like the situation of the listeners. Do you remember we were talking about the Joe Rogan show and Smart List, which was a new podcast that was doing well, and some of the true crime ones were, but I think they change like frequently, very frequently. But one thing we did talk about, if you remember or not, I remember this was like August 2020. And like, I remember that Spotify was really jumping into the podcast game and just pretty much buying out any podcast they could add to their arsenal of like ownerships. And so I think they're still on that mission where they want to be like the podcast leaders, or at least, go up against iTunes or whatever the other ones are. And so like they keep, I heard this over this last year, they bought out a bunch of big podcast names and just kind of put them within their realm, and so you have to go through Spotify if you want to listen to them.
Yeah, I guess that's the
business.
Maybe the Facebook acquisition model acquired the eyeballs and ears of listeners. Because the next thing I was going to say is, like, as a business, podcasts aren't great. Maybe for the top 1% that get bought out by Spotify or Apple or whoever, it works for them. But for the vast majority of people, it's a hobby. It's something enjoyable, and if they're lucky, it takes off, because sources of revenue aren't totally obvious. You basically have to do like old school radio style, where you do a jingle halfway through, or you mention a product or something during the show, as we've been trying to like bait sponsors throughout various episodes to no avail. So there's like that possible revenue stream, or just having a sheer number of listeners that gets the attention of a big player, and then something will happen. But otherwise,
that's very true. I mean, if you're looking at it from a business model point of view, I think it's a horrible business. If you do it for fun and as a hobby, sure, no problem, like an hour or two a week here. But if you want this to be a job, I think the market's way too saturated at the moment. You have to really be unique and distinctive in what you produce, and at the same time find a way to make profitability out of it. I mean, I've seen some podcasts where you join as members, so you get your free podcast, but if you want special ones, you can have like a yearly membership. People sell merch, right? Merchandise as well. So one thing people do is, I've noticed, is that they will put their podcast on YouTube as well, so they can make money from views as opposed to listens, which I don't think exists yet in podcast world. I might be wrong in terms of listening, but I know for sure with views, if you get a certain number, then YouTube starts paying you, right? And the more views you get.
Yeah, and I wonder how that works with like Joe Rogan, because he uploads his like 4-hour episodes onto YouTube. Well, and he probably gets tons of money off of that, but maybe Spotify says, "Hey, wait a minute, that's conflicting with our deal here."
I've always wondered, and this is a little tangent, but very much related. I've always wondered about like, people making money off of YouTube. I understand there's like YouTubers whose profession it is to put to put content out and make money. But like, what happens with musicians who put their official music videos and everything out online? So I was talking to my wife, and she said she's in the marketing space as well. She said like they make money off that as well, like royalties. Oh, they make a portion of that. But like sometimes I don't really. For kids, music videos are the visuals for the song. I sometimes I watch some music videos online, not a lot, but I usually listen to music on YouTube and I just keep it in the background. And I wonder if they're like making money off of like if like big multi-million dollar artists are also making money off YouTube views, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some cut, or their record label or whatever takes the place of a record label these days, makes the money.
Some AI.
Um, yeah, because like something like Justin Bieber, he one of a few of his songs get like a billion
Yes.
views on YouTube.
There's this
Katy Perry, they're like billions and billions of views. So
and
that's a decent chunk of change there.
an official website, like a YouTube page of Justin Bieber or like the distributors or whatever. It's not some like guy who ripped it off and is like replaying it or whatever. So like there's these calculators you can go on online where you can like put in the number of views and it'll show you how much it'll equal to in payment. And like a billion views is a lot of cash. It's a lot of, you know. And so like do they get that money, or is it like no, the distribute like the production company, the music companies own it? Like, you know, like I don't know how any of that works, but because back in the day on the radio, like when songs are played, I think they got like a little portion of a royalty each time a song is played or something, right? So like,
Yeah, I think so. So I'm sure they get something. We don't get any income yet from our postings on YouTube. We have 37 subscribers. I don't know who you are or why you're doing that, but thank you so much.
thank you.
And um, I think we have about 3,000, almost 4,000 views in total on YouTube.
That's cool.
So that was a decent move, is to record us via Zoom instead of just having our voices on YouTube, which I don't think anybody would want to hear just that.
Yeah.
So that's helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the thing is, there's so many different formats and styles of podcasts. So like ours is relatively unscripted and free flowing. I some episodes I'll go into a deep dive and I'll do a lot of research, and some of them I'll just sort of wing it, like this one. But like some of the serious podcasts that are out there, like the top 10 ones,
Totally.
Joe Rogan's more of like an interview guy, and I'll have someone famous on. They'll talk for hours and smoke weed and drink whiskey, something like that. But then there's
we did all that.
yeah, and we should maybe do that.
And then others will go into like research and investigations and stories.
But like, yeah, I was gonna say, like, I looked at some of the top 10s in Canada, because you can do it by country: USA, India. Like crime, people love these crime, podcasts which go from episode to episode, in serial length. So those ones are like heavily researched. They're like huge amount. They must have teams of people doing the research for them.
Yeah.
And those are a lot of like, they're pretty scripted and they're produced. They got sound effects and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, we can put some in ours if you want. I can tomorrow. With this episode, I'll put some in. Okay.
Yeah, throw some in there. And then some people do live podcasts, which we might do eventually. And then some of them have celebrities like doing like narration of like a novel or something, more like an audiobook. So there's all sorts of different formats. But it just seems like these days everyone and their mother has a podcast, just because it's a relatively straightforward thing to put out there. It is a fair amount of work to get going, even for our relatively basic setup. A lot of legwork in getting the website up and running, disseminating it, recording it. I think we're unedited. We don't do any kind of so much filtering of what we've done, right?
Yeah, that's true. When I edit, I just cut out the parts before we start, and then after we finish. There were a couple episodes, especially when we had guests, that I made a couple edits, like just to kind of make it like sound better, just to make them, make sure they're comfortable as well, which is of course not an issue at all. But for whenever you and I do it, most and like 99% of the time, it's what you hear is what you get. So
there you go. That's why our listeners love us. It's authentic, just candid conversations back and forth.
I did want to say one point is that I think though, you listen to some podcasts, they have fact checks at the end of the podcast or whatever, and they have a responsibility to get the facts right. And those are mostly because they're like, they have informations and stories which they have to they're giving away content. I mean, they're talking about content that's like factual, so they need to be accurate in it, especially those true crime ones. There's a lot of research that goes into them. Whereas I think if you have conversations with people or you're just chatting here and there, I think it's a little bit more relaxed because we don't really do a fact check. I don't know if we should, but there's like
No,
a
I think that my dad does. He's the fact checker. I get emails every week.
thank you, Mr. Lewis. I think there is a legal responsibility as well for some of those podcasts to do it. Maybe there's one for us too, but we haven't. But like I used to, if you listen to some of these, like the ones that come out of NPR, the serial, I think they're called the serial podcast, like the ones about true crime. They're so
Yeah.
well published. It's like watching an Oscar winner movie to like some movie that some like a film student made on the corner of the street, and like sound effects, and like not only that but like the way people speak, the equipment they use, the interviews, the style they cut it. It must take lots of people and lots of time and lots of money to put those together, but that's their job, right? Like that's what they're like, a production company, like just like a TV company or a film company, like their job is podcasts. So some people have really mastered their field, which is great, good for them. Like,
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when we started this, I wasn't really listening to podcasts all that much. I think the one I listen to now the most is these NPR ones. So
yeah,
Planet Money and How I Built This.
yeah,
I think those are really good because
that's
so
a
how I built this is talking with like super successful business people and their story of how they built their company. And Planet Money is just all sorts of random interesting stories about the world of economics and finance. So
yeah.
those are cool, but they're very well researched, and like even the interviews, the host knows what he's talking about with his guest, and it's not just winging it.
Do you think this is the future of
It's just
interviews?
the future.
Is it, or do you think this is just a fad, like something new is going to come up in a couple of years and take over? Because growing up, like our parents or maybe our grandparents, it was the radio. I would argue that it was the TV for us mostly, and then like the internet the last couple of years. And so this is sort of the thing. And like if you look at the data, young kids don't even watch television anymore. They spend most of their time in front of a screen. So like you can play a podcast,
Yeah.
whatever you want. But like, do you think, like, what do you think is next in the line of media?
Holograms and Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of thing,
Oh,
but virtual reality stuff. But I think podcasts will always have a place or some like form of what we're doing because it's like the medium. I don't know about you, like when you find is there a good time to listen to a podcast, because a lot of my problem with listening to a podcast is I found it disturbing because I like to focus on the material of what they're saying. So music you can kind of just float in and out of.
yeah,
But I get annoyed if I'm like cutting in and out of a podcast when they're talking about something that's like sequential and fact based.
totally.
So like now that I'm commuting for a good chunk of time, it's a good time for me to listen to a podcast. So I know that's coming back online now, like somewhat post Corona. People are going to be listening it on their commutes in their car or what on the train or whatever. And I also listen while I'm cooking. So like I cook on my own, and then I just put a podcast on, and then boom. Those are the two times when I do it. And I think people are kind of the same. They have their own moments when they want to do that, and they can't look at a screen all the time
Yeah.
while they're cooking. So it's a good opportunity.
Do you
Yeah.
listen to any of the true crime podcasts or the interview style podcasts?
No, like I said, it's just those two. Those ones. I'm not too much of a crime geek.
I'm not. Yeah. Do you listen
Yeah.
to this podcast? Do you listen to yourself?
At first, like when we first started, I'll be honest, I hated it. I hated to listen to the sound of my own voice. I refused to listen to the first few episodes. But now I have gone back a few times.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to a full episode, I don't think.
Oh yeah, me neither. I actually don't listen to ourselves intentionally, just because I don't like the sound of my own voice. And if there's anything wrong, somebody will tell me. But sometimes I hear my wife listening to us in the other room, and then I have to like close the door because I just get like,
Yeah, exactly.
listen to. I'm like a meta actor, I can't watch myself on TV. But sometimes like we get comments and people mention us and they say great episode, this and that. So I'm happy in terms of that. Yeah.
So what about lessons learned or tips and tricks? So do you have any that come to mind right off the bat?
I would say my first one was that like just do it. If you're interested in doing it, just have fun and do it. Don't worry about anything else. Either yourself, if you have a topic, or you're an expert with a friend or a bunch of people, just have fun, and like don't do it for any other reason than having fun. And like I'm not a very like advanced IT person, but I understood editing, and I learned the posting. Dave knew marketing, and we just had topics that we wanted to talk about. We just put it up, man, and we had no expectations, and it was just fun. And just do it, I think, is the first tip for me.
Yeah. And it's got to be fun, right? If it's not fun, it's not sustainable. So we've enjoyed having conversations throughout the COVID period, and
Uh,
thought, well, why not record our conversations and put it out there?
Totally.
So
I should say, I mean, the impetus for this was that Dave and I, during when COVID happened, you were in the Netherlands, I was in Turkey. We were both stuck in our apartments. I think we were talking every couple of days, like
mm.
and then I was like, hey, why don't we just post these online as a podcast, talk to our friends? And it was sort of like a form of, I don't know how you consider it, but for me, it was sort of like a form of therapy, or at least just like something to do and get through the weird time that is somewhat still going on, but like a little bit more
Yeah,
relaxed. So it was, and then now there's like a record of these phone calls pretty much that we've had 52 of them or 51.
yeah, come back to haunt us somehow.
And then, like we got our friends involved in it as well. And we just got, and you get to meet interesting people and interesting topics, and you learn a little, which, I'm always about learning. So like, even if it's in the most interesting way, or if it's just once a week or something unique. So every time you brought a topic, I was like, that's really cool. Like, and hopefully you found the same about the topics I brought, but we just found a way to just a space to speak.
Yeah, and I think one of many good things for us that I would say is be consistent. So we were pretty good at doing like weekly podcasts.
Yeah.
So one thing, just to like enjoy what you're doing, just put it out there, but also just keep going. Like, don't get discouraged by like, oh, no one's listening to us, this sucks, I quit. Just keep doing it, and putting it out there, and you'll find your rhythm and your kind of niche. I mean, I don't know if that we found ours in particular, but I think the whole concept behind Super Respectable is that it's weird and wonderful things from around the world. So
Yeah.
we'll have kind of like random topics that I think I find interesting, you find interesting.
Yeah.
So you're a person, I'm a person, and there are other people out there
Yeah.
who are also going to connect to that sort of thing, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. I think you made a good point. Like consistency is actually key, not only for podcasts, but for I would say for most things in life, right? You're
For
gonna have
everything, yeah.
downs and stuff. Just keep at it. I mean, I always remember when we were doing research for this, I was looking at other podcasts, and some people like post like 2-3 times a week, which is crazy, right? But for both of us who had families and other obligations and everything, once a week was fine. The approach we took in terms of like finding weird and random topics worked for us. But consistency for sure. Just do it for sure. I would also say, uh, I would say like don't worry so much about like the technology behind it. It was kind of overwhelming at first for me too, but there's so many resources out there that like if you go through Simplecast, or for example, hint hint,
Simplecast.
they
Great
make it
Simplecast.
super easy for you. I actually was telling, I don't know if it's you I was telling, I think I told you, but I might have told Halima too, my wife, that their user interface, their UI is like so easy to use. Like I think anybody could do it. So like now you just, all your job is just to record, edit, and post it, and they'll do the rest. So like the tech is really getting easier and easier, and I think it's going to continue on that path as this area grows. So I do wish I did get a microphone though. That was like a one thing. At the end, I kind of got lazy with it, and I just used my iMac. But you had one.
Yeah, I think that's one area where like right now I'm using my AirPods, which are not probably the best for audio quality, but there are a few times where I use my Bose headphones, and that probably
Yeah,
helps a little bit.
yeah,
But I think to take it to the next level, we should have had like Jamie. He had it all. He had the setup
yeah.
to get a proper microphone, which I still might do. I might get a nice little microphone here. That's something that's quite good. I think it's actually been helpful. Just for general presentation, just having like a structure, and it's
Yeah.
not like a formal work presentation, right? But it's just been a cool way to have a free flowing dialogue and conversation about something that you find interesting. So it's like a 2-person Toastmasters.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? It's like, how did you find over the last year finding topics specifically? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Like, did you have a list? How did you approach that?
Yeah, sometimes I would almost always do it on the day,
Yeah.
and sometimes I would do it within the hour or 2 hours before.
Yeah.
Full disclosure.
Okay.
but there were some times where I really found it like I go deep and take lots of notes, and but generally speaking, my starting point would be Wikipedia or something I read once. And I had like a mental note, like I want to talk about that because I think it's cool. Like,
Yeah,
places that shouldn't exist or don't exist, or
exactly.
undiscovered people and places, and all those kind of millionaire janitor. I just think these kind of stories are cool.
Yeah.
So they deserve some airtime. Never made any spreadsheets, but it was just sort of poking around through YouTube or Wikipedia until I came across something that I thought was interesting.
I was like, so before we even did the podcast, I'd come across these interesting stories or things I liked on the internet and just keep them, like, file them in the back of my brain. So
Mm.
when I started talking, I was like, that's why I was like, oh, the island in Mexico. I'd known about that before, the Yakuza. So I kind of went through the list of things that I had already liked. And then, like you, I would start researching things and looking at things like, okay, we focused on this part of the world this year, this week. How about I try to look at something next week or a different topic? So I tried to range it kind of globally, but there was a lot of personal kind of places I'd gone and interests I had, which I tried to include. And then when I ran out of those, then I would keep, like, searching in the internet and, like, being like, oh, this could be interesting. So, but from now on, like, whenever I go on the internet, I'm gonna just, like, bookmark anything I find fascinating because there's so
Well,
much there, so much.
I've received compliments from people saying it's impressive how many topics you guys have managed to cover
I,
in a year, and I think it's pretty good. So, I mean, it's endless, right? The world has unlimited amounts of things you could possibly talk about, and just watch us. We're going to find some more insane things to talk about coming
totally.
forward.
I mean,
Um, yeah,
I would give that tip to people as well, is that, like, focus in on a topic or a theme, but still give yourself some slack in that theme. You know what I mean? So, like we weren't like, we're gonna talk about, like, murders in India and from 1950 to 1955 only. Like, you know what I mean? We were kind of like weird and fun topics, so we were able to put it in. And ultimately, like I said, back to point one, make sure you enjoy what you're talking about so you can have, like, perspectives. It's almost like writing an essay, right? Like, what we're doing is we have our intro, then we talk about our topics, our bodies. We always put our opinions in there as well. And then we just have a discussion, because this is not an academic podcast, which would be so boring. This is that, yeah, like, find things that you're fascinated by, and then just do your best and just try it out. Like, what's there to lose? I mean, maybe one day you'll be walking down the
your
street.
job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. Maybe, but maybe one day people will know who you are. If that's what you want, that's cool too. But it's kind of cool to think that other people have the same interests as you around the world, right? Like, it's kind of cool that, like, that connects you. That you're like, oh, you know what? Like, I also am interested in, the island where, like, people who've never met humanity
Yeah,
lives in and stuff like that. Which is, by the way, something I came across years and years ago, and I found it fascinating. And that was your topic, right? So, like,
yeah.
so Control D or Command D, bookmark.
Well, what I'm curious about is whether people who listen to our podcast manage to make it all the way through every episode,
Oh yeah.
or like listener time per episode, because our episodes generally are quite long. They can be around an hour on average, I guess.
Yeah.
So if anybody manages to make it through every episode, then hats off to you.
Do you th-
Um,
here's a follow-up question to you. Do you
yeah.
think, like, when people are listening to our episode, like, what are they doing? Do you think they're like, are they, like, in front of the computer? Are they going to work? Are they listening at work? Like, what do you think they're doing when they're listening?
Well, our first ever listener survey will be sent around to the identified parties to gather market research.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't know. If anybody's listening right now and would like to give this their take on what they like to do while they podcast listen to our
Yeah.
podcast, then please.
Yeah. It's
Um,
because it's like, I usually listen to podcasts while I'm working. I'll have it in the background, and I listen to, like, interviews. So, like, it doesn't have to be so specific. Like, if I miss a chunk of it, it's like a song to me. It's not really there. But yeah, like, I wonder if others are also, like focusing 100% of their energies on us, or they're just like, no, those are those two weird guys I just have on the background every week. Like, yeah,
yeah, and the other thing is like, I think most people are listening to the audio format versus visual YouTube.
yeah,
Um,
that's it. Correct.
and some people just have the voice for radio. I
Yeah,
don't consider my voice to be particularly noteworthy, but there are some people out there who just have, for movie trailers.
Yeah.
There's always like those guys. I don't know if
Trailer guy.
they're still around. They don't do it so much anymore these days, do they? There was always like a guy who'd go, and now coming to theaters. And there was a few voices that were really kind of, you'd hear them over and over again. And they must get insurance on their vocal cords or something, because just like that's their cash cow, right?
Totally. That's a good point. Yeah. I wonder, yeah, I mean, there could be, I know there's some people who are podcasters who are getting famous now, right? Like they're sort of like, some of the bigger podcast names. And so they're really well known for it. But I don't know if this medium will continue, and if so, where it'll go towards. But I compare podcast to radio. I think it's the closest thing to it. And I really enjoyed the radio. I still listen to the radio, like when I drive and stuff.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I still remember all the stations and stuff I grew up with. I know it's sort of like a dying art form, but I think at least with podcasts, like you can download them, you can listen to them, you can stream them, they're on YouTube as well. Some of them, we have Spotify. I've never listened to a podcast on Spotify, but even when we go on road trips, my wife and I, we listen to like the true crime ones, the 9-parters or the 8-parters, and we're just like, what's happening? And so the one thing I really like about podcasts, generally speaking, is that it's free. Most of them, right? Like they're free to most people. So like if you're connected with something, you don't need to pay to it. You can just follow up weekly or bi-weekly or whatever it is, and just kind of get like up to date. And it's gonna be part of your routine. So it's fun. It's better than like going out, like, playing video games all day long or doing something else to waste your time. Like I think you learn a little bit, you spend time with some people, and then you can connect with others as well who like also do it. And it's kind of building an online community, I guess.
Yeah, it's a cool thing, and it's a nice conversation piece too. I mean, yeah, when you go out into the streets and you run into your friends and you say, "Hey, wait, I'm doing this." Oh yeah, I know about your podcast.
Yeah.
So it's nice dinner party conversation to stand out from just the regular run of the mill stuff that we do.
Yeah.
We have a nice hobby here.
There you go. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
No, I think we've run its course here with
No problem. I have enjoyed the last 51 weeks. We have more to come. We hope there's tons of topics. Hopefully we can get some more of our friends and interesting guests on. But thanks, Dave, for presenting and for your time over the last year. I hope you've had fun too, but I've enjoyed and look forward to every episode.
Yes, it's been a real pleasure to have these weekly visual and audio conversations. So I hope our listeners continue to support and follow us.
Too. Let us know. Of course, we're always open to comments. Some people do comment, and we appreciate it, and we always try to improve. And if there's topics or there's things they like or dislike, let us know. But
yes, absolutely, please.
But
what's our email address again?
It's superrespectable@gmail.com.
Thank you very much.
All right, Dave. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week for 52. 1 year.
52.
All right. Take care.
All right, thanks, Tosh. Ciao.